She wasn't supposed to fall in love with the child of a man she barely knew. But grief doesn't ask permission, and neither does love. When the Admiral found his daughter asleep in the arms of the nurse everyone dismissed, he didn't see a stranger. He saw the only person who had ever made his broken family feel safe. What he didn't know was the woman rocking his little girl to sleep had spent a decade reading danger no one else could see, and in the next 12 hours, that skill would be the only thing standing between his daughter and death. If you love stories like this, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from, and subscribe. Welcome to the Navy SEAL Nurse Stories. Sir, you can't be back here. Admiral Marcus Reyes didn't stop walking. His dress blues were still buttoned to the collar. His hands still smelled like the funeral home's carpet. He'd promised himself he would be strong for Lily. He wasn't. He was barely standing. The family lounge door was cracked open. Warm light spilled into the hallway. He heard nothing. No crying. No fear. That silence scared him more than anything had all day. He pushed the door open. Lily was asleep, curled against a woman in navy blue scrubs, her small hand fisted in the fabric of a stethoscope strap, a worn teddy bear tucked under her chin. The nurse held her like she'd done it 1,000 times, one hand resting flat against Lily's back, slow, steady, like she was counting breaths. Marcus's own breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen his daughter sleep peacefully in 11 days. Not since the hospice call. Not since the house went quiet in a way no 4-year-old should have to live inside. He pressed both hands over his mouth. He didn't trust his voice. The nurse looked up. Her eyes found his instantly, like she'd known he was standing there before the door even opened. She wouldn't stop crying, she said quiet. I told the desk I'd sit with her until you got back. How long? 2 hours. He'd been gone 40 minutes. He didn't question the math. I'm sorry, he said. You shouldn't have to. I wanted to. Something in the way she said it stopped him. Flat, certain, not the soft, apologetic tone hospital staff used with grieving families. A tone that didn't ask for anything back. He stepped closer. Her name tag read C. Hayes, RN, Pediatric Unit. Nothing else. No reason his gut should be telling him to stand up straighter around her. But it was. He'd spent 22 years reading rooms, reading people. Every dulled, grief-heavy instinct he had was telling him this woman was not simply a nurse who'd gotten attached to a sad little girl. She was watching the hallway behind him. Not him. The exits. The angles. He'd run that exact scan 1,000 times himself. You military? He asked, before he could stop himself. Something flickered behind her eyes. Gone almost before it arrived. No, sir. Her voice was even. Just tired. He let it go. No room left in him today to chase a feeling. He crossed the room and knelt beside the couch. Lily stirred at the change in air, nose wrinkling, one eye cracking open. Daddy? I'm here, baby. Is Mommy in the room with the flowers? His chest caved in on itself. Mommy's somewhere better, he managed, but she's watching you. Always. Lily's eyes slid shut again, too tired to question the answer. Her hand stayed knotted in the nurse's scrubs. The nurse didn't pull away. She let the small fist hold on. She's safe, the nurse said, so quietly it wasn't really meant for him. That's all that matters right now. Marcus studied her face. Late 30s, dark hair pulled back, a few strands loose around a face that had learned to give nothing away. A thin scar traced pale along her collarbone, half hidden beneath the scrub collar. Not the kind that came from an IV line. He'd seen scars like that before. On operators who'd bled for something bigger than themselves and never talked about it. Ms. Hayes, he said carefully. Have we met? No, sir. You're sure? A pause. Half a second too long. I'm sure, she said. He didn't believe her. But grief had hollowed him out too far to argue with a woman who'd spent 2 hours keeping his daughter from drowning in silence. Thank you, he said instead. For today. You don't have to thank me for holding a scared kid, Admiral. The rank slipped out of her mouth like it belonged there, natural, unpracticed. He hadn't told her his rank. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, unspoken, before she looked back down at Lily's sleeping face. "You should get her home," the nurse said. "She'll sleep better in her own bed." "Will you be here tomorrow?" The question surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise her. "I work the pediatric unit most days," she said. "Room 4B, if she needs someone." He gathered Lily into his arms. She barely stirred, the teddy bear crushed against her chest. At the door, he turned back. The nurse was already gone, down the corridor, walking with a precision too controlled to belong to someone who'd simply had a long shift. Marcus stood there, his daughter's heartbeat steady against his chest, and felt something cold settle low in his gut. He didn't know her name. Not really. But the part of him trained to survive rooms he could never describe to his wife was already certain. Whoever Nurse Hayes really was, she had not learned to move like that carrying bedpans. 2 days later, the pediatric unit would erupt in chaos. He would find out exactly how right he was. "She's just anxious," Dr. Bennett said, not looking up from the chart. "Grief does strange things to children. It's psychosomatic." Claire Hayes stood in the doorway of room 4B, watching Lily's small chest rise and fall too fast, too shallow, her lips carrying a color that had no business showing up on a 4-year-old. "Doctor, her SATs dropped to 91 20 minutes ago. And they came back up. Kids desaturate when they cry." He finally looked at her, the look he gave every nurse who questioned him. Tired patience wearing thin. "You're not a cardiologist, Ms. Hayes." "No," she said. "I'm not." She didn't say what she was. She never did. Marcus stood at the foot of the bed in civilian clothes now, jeans and a gray sweater, looking more lost than he had in his dress blues. He hadn't slept. Neither had Lily. Not really. She'd woken twice in the night gasping, her small hands clutching at her chest like she was trying to hold something in. "Admiral," Bennett said, softening his voice the way people did for rank. "I understand this is frightening, but children process trauma physically sometimes. Stomach aches, headaches, even breathing changes. It's not uncommon after a loss like this." She had blue lips, Marcus said. For a few seconds. It resolved. Claire watched Lily's monitor. The rhythm was off. Not dramatically. Not enough to trip an alarm. But she'd spent years learning to read the difference between noise and signal, between panic and the real thing hiding just beneath it. This was the real thing. She'd seen it before, not in children, in operators coming off adrenaline crashes so hard their hearts forgot how to keep time, stress cardiomyopathy, the heart breaking, literally, under a weight too big to carry. A 4-year-old's heart could break just as easily as a grown man's. Maybe easier. "I'd like an EKG," Claire said. Bennett's jaw tightened. "I already ordered one for the morning." She might not have until morning. The room went quiet. Marcus's eyes moved from the doctor to her and back, a father drowning in 2 versions of expertise, unable to tell which one to trust. "Ms. Hayes," Bennett said, low and even, the tone reserved for staff about to be written up. "I'd like to speak with you outside." She followed him into the hallway. He shut the door behind them. "You are a pediatric floor nurse," he said. "You are not qualified to diagnose cardiac events, and you are certainly not qualified to instill panic in a grieving father." "I'm not trying to instill panic. You're overstepping. I've noticed it before. The way you read rooms, the way you talk to families like you know something the rest of us don't. It's inappropriate." Claire kept her voice level. She'd been trained to keep her voice level in rooms far worse than this one. "I'm asking for a test that takes 4 minutes. And I'm telling you the chart doesn't support it. The chart isn't the child." Something flickered across his face. Not doubt, just irritation at being challenged by someone beneath him. He straightened his coat. "I'll note your concern," he said, in a voice that meant he wouldn't. "Get some rest, Ms. Hayes. You've clearly grown attached to this family, and that's clouding your judgment." He walked away, before she could answer. Claire stood alone in the hallway for a moment, breathing through the old, familiar burn of being dismissed by someone with a badge that outranked hers, but a set of eyes that saw far less. She'd spent a decade in rooms where being wrong meant someone didn't come home. Bennett had spent his career in rooms where being wrong meant a bad outcome got explained away in a chart note. She pushed the door open again. Lily was awake, small and pale against the pillows, watching her with the unguarded trust only children had left to give. "Nurse Claire," Lily whispered. "My chest feels funny." Claire crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, taking the small wrist gently between two fingers. The pulse under her fingertips was too fast, thin, working too hard. "I know, baby," she said quietly. "I've got you." She looked up at Marcus. His face had gone the color of the wall behind him. "Get me a crash cart," she said, no longer asking anyone's permission. "Now." Marcus didn't question it. He ran. Claire's hands moved to the monitor leads, checking placement, checking rhythm, every motion economical and certain in a way that belonged to a different life entirely. Lily's small fingers curled around hers. "Stay with me," Claire murmured, watching the line on the screen begin, almost imperceptibly, to change shape. "Stay right here with me." The monitor's alarm began to scream. The rhythm on the monitor collapsed into chaos. "VFib," Claire said, already moving. "She's in VFib." A code team burst through the door seconds later. Dr. Bennett at the front, his face drained of its earlier certainty. He froze for half a second at the sight of the screen, that fatal half-second doctors weren't supposed to have. Claire didn't freeze. "Start compressions," she said, hands already on Lily's small chest, counting with a precision that came from muscle memory built somewhere far from any hospital. 2 fingers below the nipple line, depth 1.5 inches. Someone get me the pediatric paddles. "Ms. Hayes, step back," Bennett started. "She needs to be defibrillated in the next 90 seconds, or she doesn't make it to your cardiologist." Claire didn't look up. "Charge to 2 joules per kilogram." A resident, younger and faster to trust competence over hierarchy, grabbed the paddles and charged them without waiting for Bennett's order. "Clear," Claire said. The small body jolted. The line on the monitor stuttered, searching for rhythm. Nothing. "Continue compressions. Epi, 0.1 milligrams per kilo, IV push." Claire's voice never rose. It dropped instead, low and flat, the way voices did when the person speaking had learned that panic killed people faster than injuries did. "Come on, Lily. Stay with me." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, a hand braced against the frame like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He'd watched men die in combat. He'd never watched anything like this. "Charging," the resident said. "Clear." Another jolt. Every person in the room held their breath. The line steadied, wavered, steadied again. "Sinus rhythm," the resident breathed, disbelief cracking his voice. "We've got sinus rhythm." Claire's shoulders dropped half an inch, the only sign she gave that she'd been holding herself together by will alone. She checked Lily's pulse at the wrist, then the neck, confirming what the monitor already showed. "Get cardiology down here now," she said, full echo. "She needs it in the next 10 minutes, not the morning." Nobody argued this time. The room emptied into motion, nurses and techs moving Lily toward imaging, Bennett trailing behind them, looking like a man watching his own authority dissolve in real time. Claire stayed a moment longer, one hand resting on the empty bed rail, breathing hard for the first time since the alarm went off. "How did you know?" Marcus's voice behind her, rough, stripped bare. She turned. He was staring at her the way people stared at something they couldn't unsee. "The rhythm change," she said carefully. "I've seen it before." "Where?" "Doesn't matter." "It matters to me." He stepped closer, his voice shaking now, all the careful control from the hallway gone. "You called a rhythm change from across a room before the monitor caught it. You ran a code like you'd done it 100 times. You knew compression's depth to the decimal." "That's not nursing school, Claire. I've briefed medics. I've watched Special Forces medics work. That was tactical." She said nothing. "Who are you?" Down the hall, A security guard was already speaking into a radio, and a hospital administrator in a gray suit was walking fast in their direction, phone pressed to her ear, eyes locked on Claire like she'd finally connected pieces that had been sitting loose for days. "Ms. Hayes," the administrator called out, "I need you to come with me." Claire glanced once more at Marcus. Whatever she'd spent years building, the quiet, the anonymity, the ordinary life stitched together shift by shift, she felt it starting to come apart at the seams, right there in a pediatric hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear. "I saved her life," she said, quiet, steady. "Whatever happens next, that part is true." She followed the administrator down the hall, past the nurse's station, past the whispers already starting behind cupped hands, and did not look back. Marcus watched her go, his daughter's heartbeat steadying 2 rooms away, and felt the last of his composure crack wide open. Because now he remembered exactly where he'd seen those eyes before. 6 years ago. A different name. A warning that had saved his life in a country he was never allowed to name out loud. The administrator's office smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. "Ms. Hayes, or whatever your name actually is," said Diane Whitfield, arms crossed. "Dr. Bennett has filed a formal complaint. Scope of practice violation, insubordination, endangering a patient by delaying physician-directed care. I saved that child's life. You performed advanced cardiac intervention without a physician's order." "There wasn't time for an order." Whitfield's mouth thinned. "There's always time to call a code properly." Claire sat with her hands folded on the table, back straight. The posture Whitfield clearly read as defiance, and Claire knew was simply the only way she'd ever learned to sit in a room like this. "Where did you train?" Whitfield asked. "Because it wasn't at any nursing program I've ever seen produce someone who calls a Joule setting from memory under pressure." Claire didn't answer. "Your background check came back thin," Whitfield continued. "Suspiciously thin. Employment history that starts 11 years ago like you were born a 30-year-old woman with a nursing license and nothing before it. My credentials are valid. That's not what I asked." The door opened without a knock. Marcus stood in the frame, still in the gray sweater, his face carved from something harder now than the grief that had hollowed it out 2 days earlier. "Admiral, this is a personnel matter," Whitfield said. "I have to ask you to—" "Sit down, Diane." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Whitfield sat. Marcus crossed the room and stood behind the empty chair beside Claire, not sitting, just standing there like a wall going up. 6 years ago, he said, I was in a briefing room I'm not authorized to name, looking at intelligence I'm not authorized to describe, about to walk my team into a position that would have gotten 4 of us killed inside an hour. Claire's hands went very still on the table. A warning came through an hour before we moved. Specific. Detailed. It didn't come from my chain of command. It came from an analyst nobody in that room had ever heard of, flagging a pattern everyone else had missed for 3 days. He paused. We changed the route. All 4 of us came home. Whitfield looked between them, lost. I never learned the analyst's name, Marcus said. It wasn't given. That's how it works in rooms like that. But I remembered the eyes in the photo on the briefing slide. I've spent 6 years remembering those eyes. He looked at Claire. I didn't say anything the day I found you with Lily. I told myself I was wrong. Grief makes you see ghosts. His voice cracked just slightly on the last word. But you called a V-fib rhythm from across a room and ran a pediatric code like it was muscle memory, and I stopped being able to tell myself I was wrong. Marcus, is it you? The room went silent, except for the hum of the ventilation system overhead. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She'd spent a decade building walls around the person she used to be, brick by brick, shift by shift, each one designed to keep exactly this conversation from ever happening. But the man in front of her had knelt on a hospital floor 2 nights ago and begged his daughter to keep breathing. He'd watched her run a code with his daughter's life on the table. He'd earned more truth than she'd given anyone in 6 years. Yes, she said quietly. It was me. Whitfield's pen stopped moving. I don't know what you think that means, Claire continued. But it means I've spent my life reading danger other people can't see. It means I recognized a stress-induced cardiac event in your daughter, Because I've watched hearts fail under pressure that has nothing to do with age or fitness. It means I broke protocol 2 nights ago because the alternative was watching a 4-year-old die while everyone waited for permission. What agency? Whitfield asked, quieter now, some of the accusation draining out of her voice. That's not something I can answer in this room, Claire said. But my nursing license is real. My training since is real. What I did for Lily was real. Marcus finally sat down, the wall he'd been holding up collapsing into something closer to exhaustion. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, just close enough that the gesture spoke for itself. Whatever you were, he said. Whoever you are, you're the reason my daughter is alive tonight. That's not a complaint. That's a debt. Whitfield closed her folder slowly. Dr. Bennett is going to want blood. Dr. Bennett, Marcus said, standing again, is going to learn that not every uniform comes with a name tag. The echo results came back 40 minutes later. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy, secondary to acute grief and unresolved trauma. Left ventricular function moderately reduced. Recoverable, the cardiologist said, with monitoring, medication, and time. Recoverable because someone had caught it before her heart stopped a second time. Dr. Bennett found them in the family lounge an hour after that. His coat still buttoned, his face rearranged into something between apology and self-protection. I heard the echo results, he said. I heard about your background too, Ms. Hayes. Or whatever it should be. He crossed his arms. I still stand by my assessment. Nurses aren't trained to make cardiac calls. Whatever you used to be doesn't change what you are now. Protocol exists for a reason. Protocol didn't order the EKG, Claire said. I did. And if you'd been wrong? If you'd escalated a panic attack into a full code for nothing? I wasn't wrong. This time. Marcus stepped forward, and for the first time since the funeral, there was nothing broken in the way he moved. Dr. Bennett, 2 nights ago, my daughter's heart stopped in this hospital because you wrote off her symptoms as anxiety. Ms. Hayes disagreed with you, quietly, professionally, using the language your own field trains its nurses to use, and you dismissed her because a rank on a badge mattered more to you than a rhythm on a monitor. With respect, Admiral, you're not a medical professional. No, Marcus said. But I've commanded men who died because someone senior ignored a warning from someone junior. I know exactly what that failure looks like from the inside. I watched it happen to my daughter 48 hours ago. Bennett's jaw tightened. I won't be lectured by... I'm not finished. The room went still. I've spent 6 years trying to identify the person who saved my life and the lives of 4 men under my command, with a warning nobody else caught in time, Marcus said. I found her. She was standing in a pediatric unit, in scrubs, being talked over by a man who assumed a nursing license meant she had nothing left to teach anyone. He turned to Claire. I'm formally requesting through channels I do have access to that Ms. Hayes be looped into a program I'm building, pairing tactical medical training with civilian pediatric trauma response, reading the signs everyone else misses, training staff to trust the instinct instead of overriding it because of what's written on someone's badge. That's not how hospital staffing works, Whitfield said from the doorway, folder still in hand. Then it's going to start today. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 22 years of command sat behind every word. Dr. Bennett is welcome to file whatever complaint he wants. I'll be filing my own. About a physician who ignored a documented desaturation event, a subjective clinical concern from experienced staff, and nearly lost a patient because his ego outweighed his diligence. Bennett's face drained of color. You can't. I already did. Risk management has the timeline. So does the state board, if it comes to that. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Bennett looked between the Admiral and the nurse he'd spent 2 days dismissing, and something in his posture finally cracked. Not defiance anymore, just the exhausted realization of a man who'd been wrong in front of everyone who mattered. I was trying to protect a family from unnecessary panic, he said, quieter now. I made the wrong call. Yes, Claire said, not cruel, just true. You did. It happens. What matters is whether you learn to listen next time someone tells you something doesn't feel right. Bennett left without another word, the door closing softly behind him. No slam, no final argument, just the quiet exit of a man recalculating everything he thought he knew about the people beneath him. Claire exhaled, the fight draining out of her all at once. Marcus turned to her, and for the first time, there was nothing left unsaid between them. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for Lily, for 6 years ago, too. I never got the chance. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything." His voice broke on the word. "You gave me a version of my family I thought I'd lost the night my wife died. You gave it to me twice." Down the hall, Lily's monitor beeped steady and slow, a small heart finding its rhythm again. 3 weeks later, Lily's heart had steadied enough for discharge, and the hospital's pediatric unit had a new sign on a supply closet door that used to hold nothing but extra linens. Tactical Pediatric Response Training. C. Hayes, Program Lead. Claire hadn't wanted the sign. She'd wanted, more than anything, to keep doing exactly what she'd always done. Quiet shifts, quiet rooms, a life built small enough that nobody asked questions. But Marcus had a way of building things around people, whether they asked for it or not. "You don't have to make this into something," she'd told him, the week after Bennett's resignation letter landed on Whitfield's desk. "I'm not making it into anything," he'd said. "I'm giving it a name it already had." The state board hearing had cleared her without incident. Her license was real, her care was defensible, and 6 years of clean, careful work spoke louder than a background that stayed classified, sealed, and none of anyone's business. Whitfield, to her credit, had stopped asking questions the day the Echo report proved Claire right. Now Claire stood in front of a training room full of nurses who'd once looked at her like a roomer, teaching them the thing she'd spent a decade learning the hard way. How to read a body under stress instead of just a chart. How to trust a gut instinct enough to say something, even to someone with more letters after their name. How silence, in a room where a child was dying, was its own kind of failure. "You don't need my background to do this," she told them, on the first day, standing at the front of a room that still smelled faintly like old linen closets. "You need to trust what your training already taught you, even when someone senior tells you to be quiet about it." Lily came by most afternoons after school let out, dragging her teddy bear behind her, claiming the small chair in the corner of Claire's new office like it belonged to her. "Are you a spy?" she asked one afternoon, swinging her legs, utterly unbothered by the question. "I was a lot of things," Claire said carefully. "Now I'm just a nurse who teaches other nurses. That's still cool." "Yeah," Claire said, smiling for what felt like the first time in years without carefully measuring it first. "I think it is." Marcus found them there most evenings, still in uniform some days, sweater and jeans on others, standing in the doorway the same way he had the night this all began. Quiet, watching, grateful for a silence that no longer scared him. "She sleeps through the night now," he told Claire one evening after Lily had fallen asleep on the office couch mid-sentence, teddy bear crushed against her chest. "First time since her mother passed." "Grief takes time," Claire said. "Even for hearts that are technically healthy again. I used to think strength meant never breaking." Marcus watched his daughter breathe, slow and even. "You taught me it means knowing exactly when to ask for help, even if you've spent your whole life being the one people ask instead." Claire didn't have an answer for that. She wasn't sure she needed one. She'd spent so long believing her worth lived entirely in the part of her life she couldn't talk about. The missions, the warnings, the version of her nobody was allowed to thank. It had taken a 4-year-old's failing heartbeat to remind her that the quiet years counted too. That holding a scared child until she stopped shaking was its own kind of mission, no less real for being unclassified. "I'm glad you found me," Marcus said. "Both times." "You didn't find me," Claire said. "I was right here. You just finally let yourself see it." Outside the office window, the hospital moved through the ordinary business of another evening shift. Alarms and footsteps, and the low hum of machines keeping small hearts beating. Somewhere down the hall, A new nurse was learning, for the first time, to trust a feeling she couldn't yet explain. Respect isn't handed out with a rank or a title. It's earned in the rooms nobody else is willing to stay in. Claire had learned that lesson twice now. She had a feeling she'd spend the rest of her life teaching it to everyone else who needed to hear it.